Ajaan Khao was so absolutely resolute and resourceful in striving that it would be hard to find anyone else to equal him. When it came to striving in the way of Dhamma, even in old age he still remained very skilled and resolute without weakening. When he walked Jankama, he continued for 5 or 6 hours each time before taking a rest. Even the young bhikkhus could not equal him. The striving of the wisest men is so very different from that of the rest of us, who tend to look forward more to the time when we can rest our heads on our pillows, as if pillows are more exalted than the path fruition and nibbana, which, when one looks at it and thinks about it, should make us ashamed of how clever we are in those ways that are completely lacking in essential value. Visions of Ajaan Mun. For several years, Venerable Ajaan Khao spent the Vassa period living in the hills alone, relying on 2 or 3 families of farmers to give him food when he went out on Pindabada each day. For those who are ordained as bhikkhus, this type of life provides the most happiness and peace of heart in the practice of Dhamma. Since there are no other burdens or duties to trouble one, all one's time is filled with the effort to practice the way. One's time is always one's own. One's effort is one's own in every situation, and the chitta with Dhamma is one's own in all that one does. There is nothing distracting to divide one's attention, causing it to deteriorate. A bhikkhu who lives in the present, as if tonight is the only night left to him, is not concerned with how much longer he is going to live, or with other distractions, for what he is doing is of incomparably greater value than anything else. Venerable Ajaan Khao said that when he spent the Vassa period by himself in the hills along the borders of Sakon Nakhon and Kalasin provinces, he lived in a place 3 or 4 miles distant from the nearest village. Many wild animals roamed that district, including tigers, elephants, wild oxen, red bulls, wild boar, barking deer, and various other kinds of deer. At night, he used to hear these animals' calls echoing through the forest as they roamed in search of food, often coming close to where he was staying. Sometimes they came so close that he could almost make out what kind of animal it was. Seeing these animals made him feel joyful, with metta and compassion for them. It was soon after Venerable Ajaan Mun died that Ajaan Khao spent the Vassa period in those hills. He said that when he practiced samadhi meditation during that period, Ajaan Mun came to visit him regularly in his meditation to talk about Dhamma and give him friendly Dhamma advice, sammodaniya Dhamma. When doing his routine duties in the vicinity of the cave where he stayed, or when arranging his few possessions, if he did anything improperly, Ajaan Mun would point it out to him in his samadhi meditation every time. For that reason, it seemed as though he was living with Ajaan Mun for the whole of that Vassa period. Ajaan Mun came into his meditation and told him about the customs and traditions of Thutanga bhikkhus who are intent on attaining freedom. He emphasized that the various Thutanga observances should be maintained and done properly in the way that the Lord Buddha prescribed. They should not be altered. Then he talked about the Thutanga practices that he taught his disciples to follow while he was still alive, repeating what he said for emphasis. Thus, "Throughout my life, right up to the end, I taught my disciples to observe those Thutanga practices which I knew about with certainty, without any doubt at all. So you should take them to heart and practice them with a full and complete commitment. You should never think that the sasana is the exclusive property of the Lord Buddha or any of his Savaka disciples, for in fact the sasana belongs to whoever cherishes it and is interested enough to practice the way, which includes everyone who aims to gain value from the sasana. The Lord Buddha and all the Savakas retained no part of the sasana, which they gave fully and freely to the world. You should not think that the Lord and the Savakas would dispense both parts which were good as well as parts which were bad or tainted. Whether we practice the way rightly or wrongly is entirely up to each one of us. In no way does it depend on the Lord Buddha and the Savakas. You have come here with a specific purpose to practice the way. Whether you practice rightly or wrongly is also entirely up to you, so you must be very careful in what you do so as to live contentedly in the Dhamma of one who has seen the truth. You will shortly become an acharya with many followers, so you must set a good example to show what is right and seemly, in order to be an exalted symbol of righteousness and truth, and a blessing to all who follow after you, so that those who follow you will not be disappointed. Being an acharya is a very important position, so you should examine what it means carefully. For if the acharya himself goes wrong, he may also lead many others in the wrong direction. But if he does what is right, he can equally lead countless others in the right direction. You should therefore carefully examine all aspects of what it means to be an acharya with many followers. Others will then have an unobstructed, smooth path to follow, which will not be false, because you, as their acharya, taught them wrongly. The word acharya means one who trains and develops his behavior, which is displayed externally in his actions and manners, in such a way that those who depend on him can hold him up as an example to be followed. His should not be the kind of behavior that displays falsehood due to a lack of prior thought and consideration. The Lord Buddha, who we call the Sāsada, the great teacher of the world, was not the Sāsada only at those times when he was giving a talk on Dhamma to Buddhists who came to listen to him. He was the Sāsada at all times, in every situation and position, whether reclining on his right side in the lion posture, sitting, standing, or walking about. Even when he was within a Buddhist monastery, the Lord would still be the Sāsada in every action and every movement he made, never doing anything that was uncharacteristic of the Sāsada. Therefore, anyone who has mindfulness and wisdom, and an inclination towards critical assessment and contemplation, can always take every movement and every gesture that the Lord made as a teaching and a moral example. You should not think that the Lord ever behaved in an unrestrained manner, like worldly people who like to adjust and change their behavior depending on the people and circumstances that they come across. For they behave like this in one place and act like that in another, which is the characteristic behavior of ghosts and pretas. There are both good people and bad people all over the world who do not have enough of a presence within them to hold on to as a firm, stable principle, so they cannot be a source of stability to others. Unlike worldly people, the Lord Buddha was the great teacher in everything he did right up to the day of final Nibbana. Whatever action or characteristic he displayed, he was always the Sāsada, never being deficient or incapable. So whoever holds to him as a refuge, which means a basic principle or example of how one should act and behave, can do so at any time in whatever they are doing by following his example, without any doubt as to whether the example of the Lord is suited to that occasion or not. This is why the title of the great teacher of the triple world system, Sāsada, is well suited to the Lord. When the Lord was about to enter parinibbana, he did so in a lion posture. He did not lie down carelessly as though he had thrown away his limbs and body, afraid of death and repeating mantras and magical verses so that he would go to this or that realm of existence, which is the way of ordinary people everywhere in the world. But he died composed, in the lion posture, and entered parinibbana. Meanwhile, his heart went through the process of entering Nibbana with unwavering courage and discipline, as though he were about to go on living in the world for a long time to come. Actually, the Lord proclaimed that he was the great teacher in those final moments by entering the jhanas and nirodha samapatti, and then withdrawing from them when the right moment came to enter parinibbana, fully confirming his status as the great teacher without any remaining attachments to anything in the three worlds of existence. In this way, from the moment of his enlightenment to the time of his parinibbana, the Lord Buddha made his behavior an example for the whole world to follow. He never reduced his standards of behavior below those required of the great teacher, behaving in any way like ordinary worldly people. He dutifully maintained his position of perfection right to the end. You should therefore take up the example of the Sāsada and put it into practice. Although you will not be able to match the perfection of the Lord in all respects, your behavior will still be in the category of one who follows the word of the teacher, not drifting uncontrolled like a boat adrift in a storm in the middle of the ocean that has not put out its anchor. The practice of a monk who has no correct, firmly established principles within him is likely to lack any real purpose that enables him to determine whether he will reach a safe shore, or whether he will meet various dangers ahead. He is like a boat without a rudder that is not likely to be able to take him where he wants to go. Consequently, he is bound to drift with the ocean currents, which can easily lead him into great danger. The basic principles of Dhamma and Vinaya, such as the Tūtanga observances, are the rudders of the practice, which lead it to a safe goal. Because of that, you should take hold of them and grasp them firmly. You must not waver or vacillate, which would lead those who follow you to follow a bad example and go wrong accordingly. The Tūtanga observances are the practices which proceed directly towards the goal. No other practice can equal them in this. If those who practice the Tūtangas use mindfulness, wisdom, faith, and effort in their striving, then that Dhamma which they are hoping to attain should be well within the scope of these practices. As they have been handed down to us by the Lord Buddha, it is quite certain that they are capable of leading us to success without any doubts or obstacles being able to prevent us. The Tūtanga observances are the only way that can lead us beyond dukkha. There is no other way, so you should not feel uncertain or doubtful. The Tūtangas are the place where all the methods of practice converge and lead into the process of quenching all dukkha. Those bhikkhus who prefer the Tūtanga observances as their mode of development are those who are faithful to the teaching of the Lord Buddha, who was the first teacher. Those bhikkhus who have taken up the Tūtanga observances as their path of practice are those who have proper restraint, with the Buddha as their refuge in all situations. Wherever they go or stay, they have Dhamma to help protect them as a substitute for the Sasada. They are not lonely, aimless, or unstable, for the heart's principle is the principle of Dhamma, and the principle of Dhamma is identical with the heart. Breathing in and breathing out is Dhamma, which is intimately blended into a single unity with the heart. Such people are always living with Dhamma, never being disturbed or biased. For yourself, it is true that you do not have anything to worry about in terms of Dhamma, but many people will associate with you in the future, so you must have concern for all those who follow you, both fellow monks and lay people as well, so that they may feel confident that the practices that they have picked up from you are the correct way to make progress without mistake. This was how Venerable Ajaan taught Ajaan Khao as he sat in meditation. If he slept over the time for him to wake, even just a little, Ajaan would come and point it out to him, saying, "Don't trust yourself more than Dhamma, for yourself is really just the round of samsara. The elements of the body and the khandhas are results that have come from the round of samsara right from the beginning. You should only give way to the khandhas to the extent that is necessary, but you must not give way to them more than you have to. Doing so goes against the basic nature of a bhikkhu who is never complacent. For those who are truly wise, lying down to sleep is only for the purpose of giving a temporary relief to the physical body. They do not expect to gain pleasure or contentment from resting to relieve the tiredness and weakness of the physical khandha. The bhikkhu who lies down as a bhikkhu should must be careful to remind himself of the time to get up. Like a deer that lies down to rest while roaming for food must be more mindful and careful than normal. To lie down properly means to carefully set up mindfulness before going to sleep, making the resolve to get up at a predetermined time, not lying down in the manner of one who auctions off his goods as though they were worthless, letting the customer give whatever he feels like for giving them. The bhikkhu who lies down and lets his body go however it will is not a son of the Sakya, a Buddhist who guards the religion, promoting it in himself and others, but a bhikkhu who auctions everything off arbitrarily, letting the buyer fix the price. To lie down properly in the manner of a bhikkhu who is endowed with sila and dhamma as religious duties, a bhikkhu must have a regular procedure that he follows before going to sleep. This habit makes him careful and self-possessed when he lies down to sleep. As soon as he wakes up, he must get up quickly and not linger in bed, which is the way of a lazy person who tends to get up late and who dies immersed in careless indifference, never waking enough to become aware of himself. Lying down like this is the way of a worthless animal, or of a lazy person who destroys whatever value he has and is unable to rise up and improve himself. Since such behavior is not the way of the sasana, it should not be encouraged, or else it will become a parasite creeper growing within the sasana and within the whole company of Thutanga bhikkhus. It can easily destroy you, just as a parasite creeper destroys the tree on which it depends. You should think about and compare the two concepts of lying down properly and lying down in the usual way. Compare them and search out where they differ, for the lying down properly of the son of the Sakya is very different from the ordinary lying down of people and animals everywhere. Therefore the sons of the Sakya feel that to lie down properly each and every time they rest has a special significance which remains close to their hearts all the time. This is appropriate for one who maintains mindfulness and who has the wisdom to use thought and contemplation in everything that he does, not merely thinking any old way, or speaking any old way, or acting any old way, not merely lying down, waking up, eating, standing, walking, or sitting down any old way. All such negligent behavior fails to live up to the standard of someone who has the status of the son of the Sakya, who should never act in those ways. It is generally understood by people that after the Lord Buddha and each of the Savaka Arahants had entered final Nibbana, they disappeared into oblivion and no longer had any meaning or relationship to the rest of us. But the Dhamma, which is the basic causal condition that teaches us to practice in the present, is this not the Dhamma of the one who dug deep, searched, and brought it up for the world to see and to follow in practice? And the whole body of this Dhamma, how did it remain, and why did it not go into oblivion also? The fact is that both the Buddha and Sangha are the pure heart that has naturally transcended the limits of both death and annihilation. How could the pure Chitta die, be consigned to oblivion, or become meaningless when its very nature does not accord with relative convention, sammati? When its nature no longer accords with relative convention, it is not subject to dying, or to being annihilated, or becoming meaningless. Thus Buddha is Buddha in its own right, Dhamma is Dhamma in its own right, and Sangha is Sangha in its own right, and they are not shaken or influenced by any of the concepts of the relative world of conventions, which use their authority to create harmful ideas and attitudes within us. So the whole time that we practice Dhamma which accords with Dhamma within the heart, it is like coming face to face with the Lord Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha at that time. When we know Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha by natural principles, that knowing must arise in the heart, which is the most suitable dwelling place for Dhamma. No other vessel is more appropriate to it. This is an example of the teaching with which Venerable Ajaan Mun admonished Ajaan Khao in his samadhi meditation practice when he saw that he had erred in some way. For instance, when he practiced the Thutanga observances incorrectly or not strictly enough, or when he woke from sleep at the wrong time. In truth, Ajaan Mun did not admonish him because he was convinced that he had done something wrong. Rather, he admonished him because he could see that in the future, Ajaan Khao would be associated with many bhikkhus and large numbers of lay people. For that reason, he often advised and admonished him so that he would become fully conscious of the strict ways of practicing amongst duties. Then he would be able to pass them on to all the other bhikkhus and novices who come to live in dependence on him, and they in turn would gain something worthwhile to take away with them, just as Ajaan Mun's disciples had always done. Venerable Ajaan Mun also taught him that all his possessions, such as the bowl, kettle, robes, and other things that he used in his dwelling, should be neatly put away in their proper place. This also included such things as the rags for wiping his feet. Seeing that any of them were not clean enough, he should wash them before putting them to further use. After use, everything should be neatly put away and not just left lying about all over the place. On any day that Ajaan Khao became so absorbed in other affairs that intruded into his life that he became forgetful or careless, a vision of Ajaan Mun would come to him in the middle of the night while he was practicing samadhi meditation, admonishing him and pointing out the way of Dhamma to him. He stayed alone in that cave for the whole of the Vassa period. At night he was frequently visited by Venerable Ajaan Mun, who appeared in his meditation practice as a nimitta. Sometimes sitting in meditation in the middle of the day when it was very quiet, he also saw Ajaan Mun come to visit him in the same way as he did at night. He said that it was very pleasurable for him to be able to ask Ajaan Mun all sorts of questions to make his understanding quite clear. Ajaan Mun was very proficient at answering questions with great skill and dexterity. He made the answer so clear as to remove all doubt and uncertainty every time. With some questions, Ajaan Khao had only a feeling of uncertainty, but he did not actually think of asking about it. Nonetheless, at night when he did his meditation practice, Ajaan Mun would come and bring up that question for discussion, as though he had just asked him about it. Ajaan Khao said it was truly strange and wonderful. But he could not tell anyone else, because they would probably pass him off as a mad Kammatthana monk. Mostly the Dhamma for curing the various kilesas arose from nimittas in samadhi meditation, such as those of Ajaan Mun coming frequently to admonish him, to show him the right way, and to give him Dhamma teaching. This promoted his mindfulness and wisdom, making him think and consider carefully, leaving no room for carelessness. In marked contrast to all other places he had lived, the Vassa period that he spent in that cave in the desolate jungle enabled him to develop various skillful methods, both internally and externally, which arose very frequently at all times of the day and night. Ajaan Khao was someone who lived in the present with joy and Dhamma in all postures and situations. Whether standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, he was filled with the bliss of Dhamma in the midst of the peaceful Dhamma that was the original foundation of his pure citta, which was completely pure amidst the various kinds of phenomena that made contact with the heart, displaying their meanings in various ways. The bliss of Dhamma refreshed his body and mind, making them joyful. Like a tree being cared for and supplied with fertilizer and water, and growing in a suitable climate and environment, which always keeps it fresh and moist both in the trunk and throughout all its branches, twigs, leaves, and fruit. Ajaan Khao said that when the citta remains only in the present with the calm and peace of Dhamma, then regardless of how much we get involved in things that are confusing and distracting, we still have nothing but happiness while living in the world of involvement with our own kanttas. We need not struggle to find happiness and contentment in other places or other realms, which is merely creating images to deceive ourselves, causing us to develop a strong craving, tanha, which promotes the cause of dukkha, that becomes the fuel which burns us and causes us so much misery. The happiness that is known and experienced in the heart is a happiness which is already sufficient and complete. Then this entire world and all other worlds, however many there may be in the universe of samsara, appear not to exist. That which does exist, and which is quite clear and apparent, is the citta with Dhamma, which seems to cover the whole universe, though it is impossible to explain this or compare it to anything, because there are no characteristics or data by which one can classify it. The citta that possesses the ultimate Dhamma, Acharya Dhamma, does not exist within the realms of convention, so there is no basis for making any comparisons or suppositions.